Limitations of GDP. So what is GDP? GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product, which is the value of all things produced in a country and during a certain period of time. There are two types. Firstly, there is nominal GDP, which is all goods and services valued at the current prices, which is useful for comparing GDP within the same year. And there's real GDP, which is the inflation-adjusted metric, and this uses prices of a fixed year, which is useful for analyzing GDP growth over time. And a useful calculation using both is the GDP price deflator, which is the ratio of the nominal to the real, and higher nominal means more inflation, lower means less. How is GDP computed? So there are several different approaches. Firstly, there's the expenditure approach, which takes GDP as the sum of consumer, government, spending, investment, and exports, which is exports minus imports. There's the production approach, which instead of spending looks at value added to the supply side. And there's the income approach, which takes the income of land, labor, and capital. So an example would be an economy that only has silicon, chips, and smartphones. So the value of each increases along each step with the previous product being used as an input to the next. And the value added increases along each step. And so if you were to compute GDP using all three approaches, it would sum up to 8. So using the expenditure approach, only the consumers spend. It's $8 or a value of 8, and the production approach is the total economic output, which is the total value minus the intermediate goods, which are the input costs, and 14 minus 6, that's going to be 8, and the income, which is income earned by factors of production. And over here, so whatever the previous seller earns from an X, so whatever silicon earns from chips, and that's 8 as well. So what are the limitations of GDP? GDP only looks at the economy. It does not consider quality of life through pollution, which is the environment, wealth inequality, social issues like crime and freedom, and the leisure time of citizens who could be overworked. An example of GDP not necessarily reflecting quality of life would be China. So China has consistently high GDP growth, 5 to 10%. It's the second largest GDP in the world. However, it has lots of pollution, diminished rights and freedoms. So the freedom of the press, the right to vote, which are all suppressed by the authoritarian government. It is an aging population in a highly competitive society with youth unemployment at around 20% and an overall lack of leisure time as people scramble to compete for jobs. In conclusion, GDP measures total economic output. It has real GDP and nominal GDP, but it does not consider various other things that may impact quality of life. Here are the sources.